Welcome, everyone. Such a warm welcome to all of you joining us here today. Please feel free to settle in slowly into the session. I'm Layla, and together with my wonderful sisters from We Are Feminist Leaders, from Akina Mama Wa Africa, and also from Fair Share for Women Leaders, we all want to welcome you very warmly. And my colleagues are here in the chat. You'll be able to see them. They are Sharon, Sophia, and Natalie. For those of you who need captions for accessibility, you can access live captions for this webinar by clicking on the live transcript or captions button at the bottom of your screen. We wanted to start off this session just to say and acknowledge that, look, we're coming together today to talk about care at a time when many of us are experiencing some very deep forms of personal or collective grief at world events. And what this means is, I know for many of us, our levels of emotional, mental and physical energy may be feeling really depleted at the moment. And for those of us engaged in feminist work, the risks of things like compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma and burnout perhaps have never felt stronger. So what we hope to offer you today with the support of our wonderful speakers is some sense of hope and a sense of possibility, and hopefully a reminder that caring organisational cultures can exist, they do exist. We hope to remind each other that care is something that we can really integrate and institutionalise into our work. It's not something that we need to consider as an afterthought or something that we only do during times of emergency. And we also hope to reinforce this idea that care is a kind of collective responsibility, and it's not something that it's our own individual burden to bear. One thing we also want to say is we know that whenever we talk about the topic of organisational care, often the subject of power relations come up. And often it's, the discussion goes in ways in which we explore how power is being wielded in harmful ways. And so we want to encourage you. We know that can be difficult, and we want to encourage each other. Look, if you're feeling like the conversation's getting a bit much, please take a break, please step away. And also please know that all the activities that we're going to be offering you here are completely optional. So Natalie's going to pop in the chat box a little bit more information about what you can expect today. It's a 1.5 hour session. We're going to kick off with a short care practice that we're going to all do collectively. But again, it's optional. If it's not for you, feel free to move away. We have our wonderful speakers, so we're going to have a discussion with them. And we hope, inshallah, there will be time for Q&A. There's also going to be a chance for everyone in the space to input into a shared resource in which we'll build a shared resource in which we're sharing all our favorite collective care practices with each other. There is going to be an optional breakout group discussion. If you don't want to be part of a breakout group today, and it is optional, and instead you want to be in an individual reflection room, and just to say, those rooms, there may be other people in there with you, but they are rooms of silence. There's no obligation to speak to anyone else. If you would like that, please change your Zoom screen name and add a 1 before your name. You can click on your name. You can click on the Zoom where your name appears in Zoom to kind of rename it. And you can see Natalie and I have done that in our, all of us have. Natalie, Sophia, you can see what that looks like. So if you want that, please do so. And we're going to end the session with just a moment of calm, a moment of pause, and some personal reflection time. So that's how we're going to close things off. Any questions, please do post them in the chat, and my colleagues will answer them about the agenda for today. Before we kick off with our care practice, just very quickly, I wanted to introduce you to our brilliant speakers. First of all, we have Tina Musuya, who's a feminist activist from Uganda with several years of experience of working to prevent and address violence against women around the world. And the thing about Tina is Tina has such brilliant and deep experience of institutionalizing collective care in organizational settings, not least when she was leading the Ugandan NGO Sedavip. And I've certainly been inspired by Tina's words over the years. We also have Michaeli, Ina is a feminist queer activist and sociologist. She has so many years of deep engagement in feminist and LGBTQI plus struggles. She is co-executive director of AWID, where together with her team, she's actively doing the work of, exploring how do we embed organizational care. And she's written so much about self-care and feminist movements, and she's got a lot to say about how do we move away from these kind of individualized neoliberal approaches to care towards more collective and transformational ones. And then I want to introduce you here to a very special person. Naro Alonzo is a poet. She's also a psychosocial support provider from KERI. And KERI is a Filipino grassroots collective which supports the well-being and mental health of social justice defenders. And anyone who's kind of been in a care space with Naro, in which they've been leading a care practice, will really remember it. And so I'm going to hand over to Naro now, who's going to kindly take us through a short 5-minute care practice. So Naro, over to you.
Maayong adlaw sa tanan. Good day to everyone. I'm really happy to be able to share space, share bodies, share breath with you. As we open up this space, I would like everyone to tune in into our bodies. And I'd like you to just take notice of ourselves, take notice of our bodies, from our head all the way down to our feet on the floor. And I'd like you to take notice of the hottest parts of your body. Which part of my body am I feeling some heat? Which parts of my body am I feeling a lot of energy is bubbling underneath? And I'd like you to touch that part of your body, if you would like to, wherever it feels hottest, wherever it feels like there's so much energy, so much movement going on. Then I'd like you to take notice of the coolest part of your body. Which parts of your body do you feel cold or maybe neutral? Which parts of your body do you feel calm? Perhaps a chill from the air. Perhaps it's because of an open window or the air conditioner. And take notice of that feeling. And put your mind focusing on that cold part of your body. And I'd like you to take just a few deep breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Now I'd like to invite you to imagine the stresses that you're holding, that you're carrying as a kind of fire. Imagine that your stress is a kind of fire. And I'd like you to visualize, what does my fire look like today? We recognize that fire can be helpful. It helps us cook, it gives us light, but sometimes fire can also be quite challenging to bear. I'd like you to imagine, what does my fire look like today? Is it a gas stove? Is it a bonfire? Is it a wildfire? Is it a candle? And I'd like you to really vividly visualize what your fire looks like today. And we are standing alongside these fires. For those of you who would like to share, you are free to place your fires in the chat box. What does my fire look like today? What color is it? And as we share space with each other, coming in with all these different fires, I would like to recite a short poem from the Uruguayan writer Eduardo Galeano. The world, he revealed, is a heap of people, a sea of tiny flames. Each person shines with his or her own light. No two flames are alike. There are big flames and little flames, flames of every color. Some people's flames are so still, they don't even flicker in the wind, while others have wild flames that fill the air with sparks. Some foolish flames neither burn nor shed light, but others blaze with life so fiercely that you can't look at them without blinking. And if you approach, you shine in fire. Let's take one more deep breath and imagine slowly just accepting that fire inside our body and just letting it stay inside ourselves, just calmly observing. And I'd like to invite everyone back in to this space. Thank you for sharing those 5 minutes with me. And I hope you can share your fires, your different fires into our chat box too.
Thank you so much, Naro. Thank you for that beautiful start to our session today. And to those of you that felt like it was going to serve you, thank you for participating in that with us. Welcome to those that have joined in the last few minutes. We've just started today's session. And before we dive into a conversation with our panelists, we'd love to hear about what you think about care and about organisational care and what that means to you. And so we've got a very short question we'd just like you to reflect on and respond to, if you feel able, in a Mentimeter, which is in the chat box. Layla's just shared that now. So if you could go to that link, it will take you to a web page, and there's a question and an answer box where you are able to add a word, a phrase maybe, about what organisational care means to you. What does organisational care mean to you? It's completely anonymous, but we will share a summary of those responses in a moment once you've had a chance to think about it. So take a moment, allow yourself an opportunity to reflect, and then just share a word or two, perhaps a phrase, about what organisational care means to you. Okay, and I'm just going to share my screen now so you can see some of those responses. There you go. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we've got a wonderful visualization of some things here. So I'm seeing organizational care meaning empathy, meaning respect, about accountability, interesting. I'm seeing listening and support, kindness. It looks like quite a few people are mentioning solidarity. I'm also seeing things like afterthought, showing up as humans, consistency, and understanding. Amazing. Thank you, everybody. We've got a real breadth of understandings and meanings there. I appreciate your responses. Handing back to you now, Layla.
Thank you, Nat. Yeah, thanks everyone for inputting into that. That's very powerful. Maybe I can ask Naro. Naro, can I bring you in here just to share? I don't know if you managed to see, Naro, some of those responses. Any thoughts on what was coming up on that word cloud, Naro?
I think on my end, what it reveals to me is that we're coming in with very different languages of care, and seeing how they are a lot of different words, which has a lot of different histories behind them. And it makes me think about where they came from. Like, how did we end up arriving to this point of associating solidarity with care? Like, what happened? What story did that emerge from? And I'm sure there's a story behind that. And where was it coming from? Was it unearthed from our personal experience? Was it something we've heard and that inspired us?
Thank you, Naro. Naro, you've frozen for me. I think maybe the internet's maybe a bit weak at the moment in the Philippines, but thank you for that. Yeah, and so powerful. And I was thinking about solidarity as well and how strong it was in the word cloud. And I was wondering, I wonder if we'd done that same exercise together, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, would solidarity have been quite so central in that word cloud? There's something about, yeah, contextualizing how we think about care. Thank you, Naro, for that. Well, look, I know our audience is really keen to hear from our speakers, and we wanted to launch in with a really practical question. And Tina, if you're willing, maybe I can start with you. The first question was just an invitation for you to share 1 or 2 collective care practices that you've been really proud of, that you think have been really impactful, that you're familiar with or that you've used in the past. Yeah, so over to you, Tina.
Thanks, Layla, and hi, everyone. That's a very hard question, Layla, for me, because there's plenty that have been happening. My approach and currently our approach to self and collective care is about ensuring that the organization has a soul and it's a living organization, because then it has to be an enabling space for everyone to feel able, to feel safe, to feel inspired, and it has to be intentional, because remember, as we're working on GBV work, it's heavy, it's painful, it's personal. And therefore, we must prioritize our own wellness and interest and motivation to move forward. So very quickly, there's a series of things that I will quickly speak about. I won't take so much time because they are super interconnected. The first one is to be intentional about creating those spaces where we reflect together about our own wellness and getting everyone on board to feel comfortable to talk about their feelings. I live in Uganda, I work here. How people respond when you ask them, how are you? They will tell you, I'm well. But that's not the case. We know that that's like superficial or an automatic response. So we need to get people to really speak, because the intention of checking in and greeting is to establish how well someone is, or if there's something that is bothering them. Because remember, we bring our whole self to the organization. So getting people to get comfortable to talk about how they're feeling, whether it's the difficult emotions or the simpler ones, just like we started with this session, is an extremely important way of connecting and understanding where everyone is at for us to move forward. So those check-in meetings are extremely important. And then secondly, we must be intentional about and comfortable about talking about things that we always forget about our own wellness, especially as women. For example, creating space to talk about our own personal health, the need to rest, because I really don't like it when people think that women are superhuman who must have a workspace and then have another additional maybe 6 hours of work at home. We need to be talking about those things. So the importance of rest and how to actually rest is extremely important. And then also talking about difficult issues that perhaps we never get to talk about our own health. For example, issues to do with our mental health, our own wellness, issues to talk about, people are quick to talk about teenagers and their needs. They forget we are growing. How about difficult things like menopause? How do we talk about that and make it possible and even ensure that our organizations caters for that? Because the policies must cater for that. They must cater for us as women in totality, including parenting issues. And quickly, before I close and move forward, we need to remember that as humans, we have moments of celebration. We must celebrate together. And we have points of grief. How do you support the team to celebrate together and grieve together? A very quick example, in my former work, we had moments where we had what we called our family days. Folks would bring their children and we got to know each other. We got to know where everyone lives. Everyone's birthday, we had collective birthday celebrations. And whenever each of our child or someone achieved something, we celebrated it as an organization. If one of us or the activists we work with was celebrating, we did that as well. And if they were unwell or grieving, we also did that. And we had a small, in Uganda, if there's any Ugandan colleagues here, someone will forever remember you because we do not have like a support mechanism that provides therapy. Someone will be grateful and remember you if you went to grieve with them, if you paid attention to that grieving moment. And it's done in many ways, and it's something that was really built on our traditional ways of living here in Uganda. So we cultivated that and we put it into practice. So those are like quick ways in which we were prioritizing self and collective care at the organization. Over to you, Leila.
Amazing, amazing, Tina. And I think what I take from you, Tina, is just such a powerful reminder that organizational care is so often about the small things, and that when you do small things, in your words, with intention, with consistency, over time, that can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. So thank you, Tina. I'm wondering, Ina, how would you respond to that question of kind of collective care practices? I know at AWID you I'm assuming you have a remote team, although I'm not sure. Over to you.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. One thing that stayed with me from the word cloud was showing up as human. And on the one hand, I'm thinking what a terrible world in which this is not something we can just take for granted, that we can show up as humans and the humans that we are in our own identity and location. But unfortunately, it's not something to be taken for granted yet. So, but yeah, I think a lot of the policies and practices around care are really to enable that. And yeah, as AWID, we are fully virtual. And while I believe we are committed to bring care as practice and policies in our convenings, in our membership spaces, I would like to focus on our care as an organization that employs staff. So that's a little bit different, than for a grassroots group, but it's, I think, a specific set of practices and policies.
And because we know that people experience the organization differently based on their different power positions and experiences, I also went and asked our staff for their thoughts on this question. So just giving them the credit for the input I'm bringing to you here, that it's not too much on my own experiences. And also just to say that we asked people, I asked about care practices that work, but I didn't ask about what does not work. So I also don't want to make it sound like we're perfect or we're not making mistakes. I think we're learning all the time. And I think that's also a practice of care and integrity in itself. So I would just start if we're speaking about an organization, a feminist organization where we identify with values, but it is also a workplace. I think it's important when we speak about care that we first speak about labor laws. Again, about something that should be taken for granted. But many times we have organizations that do compromise on that, or even we ourselves compromise on our own labor rights, because we are so committed and because we are willing to work overtime and we are willing to go above and beyond. And then there's also a role for care practices on helping each other to set boundaries. But I just wanted to say there's a lot of care that actually should be taken for granted and should be part of labor laws. That's our legal right. So, and then taking it from here, what our staff, my colleagues shared in terms of, I will give the two specific examples on care practices. And actually one, I would say, is a set of practices that are actually a policy. I think that's important. And one policy that people seem to really, really appreciate is something that we started during COVID, which was a mid-year break for a whole week. It's something that we have usually for end of year, around end of year holidays, but we added it during COVID for a mid-year, and we are keeping it. And that means that everybody go on leave for a week at the same time. So everybody gets some collective rest. You don't have to come back and catch up because other people have been working. Nobody has, or at least nobody was supposed to be working. And so basically we all stop together, and it really gives an actual break, and people come back refreshed. They're not scared about what's waiting for them. So that's a practice we are keeping, and we find that people really appreciate. And I think that goes also, the same principle to the way that the sick leave is handled, that you can just share how you're feeling, and that you need a break that can be for different kinds of reasons, that people are not pushing each other to work when they are unable to. That is something that is very appreciated. And I think another and maybe the other practice, I think something that unites several other responses that colleagues have shared with me is around this kind of, I think, very human way of treating each other. So again, not pushing each other to work when it's difficult, but also showing support, showing care, understanding mental health and neurodivergence, giving space for, really just going back to that point of showing up as humans and recognizing the humanity in each other. It really resonated with me. Yeah, and again, just to finish again with, very specific policies like a rest day for folks who have traveled for long. Very, very specific policies that are also then consistent for everybody. And also give you no choice but to take care of yourself, even if you are willing to give up on that.
Thank you,
right.
Ina. Yeah, thank you, Ina, for reminding us of kind of, the structural foundations of care and the fact that actually we need to get the basics right. And if we're not talking about things like workload or sick leave policies or adequate leave, or a big one, I think, that I've come across is, insecure contracts. There's many people working for large INGOs who are on very insecure contracts. All of these things, if we don't get them right, can really undermine well-being. So this issue of labor laws, there's a real invitation there, isn't there? Let's get the basics right, and let's look at the structural foundations of care and what it needs. Thank you for that. Naro, I don't know whether you want to add anything. Is there any kind of collective care practice that you're particularly proud of, that you've seen used, that has been quite powerful?
So in my end, and coming from a grassroots activist context where all of us are unpaid, we're doing this on a purely voluntary basis. We don't have any resources or budget for anything focused on human resources, or even when it comes to care. And so for us, a lot of these care practices are a form of care work and are also part of our activism. But there have been two practices which we are quite proud of that surfaced from our continued conversations about care, and also quite coming similar to Tina's cultural background. The language of care is often a language that is not spoken of in the activist movements in the Philippines, mainly because we do not have the time or the energy to care more than how we're already caring for other people on a day-to-day. The first practice that we felt was quite powerful was actually creating what we call a collective organization. This is where we learn and we realize the history of the organization and see where am I coming in. Oftentimes, we have this sense that you are choosing the organization. So you know the mission and vision of the organization. And so if you would like to join us, you have to shape yourself to fit us and align with us. So it's often very one way. And we realize that there's not enough practice wherein the organization itself actually allows people to shape it, allows people to see where are you in this organizational history? Where are you in the grand scheme of things in this universe? In the Philippine context, for example, a lot of organizations start with a form of resistance. So our collective, for example, started as a resistance against the anti-terror law. And so it was our resistance against the labeling of activists as terrorists. And so that's where we formed. However, the new members now are coming from a different context. They weren't there during those very important points in history. And so it feels as though we are passing down something, but we don't have that time to actually tell them what are we passing on, what stories are we passing on, what were the decisions that we made as we started, what were those important meetings or events that happened, and where am I coming in, or am I just just another human being, an employee, for example, or a volunteer that will stay with you for 6 months and will after that will leave, and the organization doesn't remember or forget that you were once a part of their story. And so that's when we started to just simply collectively write, how did I remember my organization? How do I remember our stories as I am part of this collective? And I think with that, after we did that kind of exercise and mapping, we realized that people remember our organization differently. Like every single person will have a different origin story of how we started. Like they will say that, oh, we started with a few words in a certain place, and then someone will say that no, actually we actually formed somewhere else. And so I think it is in that kind of environment that you clarify each other's values and we clarify each other's stories. The second care practice is that organizational care goes beyond the confines of the organization. And this is something that we do with intention. And so when we talk about care, oftentimes it's a policy that is within the organization, but sometimes the policy doesn't allow space for the partners that we work with. So for our collective, for example, anything that KERI practices internally must also be something that we also share. So for example, if it's something about only communicating or sending messages on a weekday, we should also do the same practice with our partners, with other activists who are not part of KERI. And it is, I think, in that practice that we start to embed or integrate care, not as an organizational policy or something that's only isolated within, but rather something that we embody, that we practice alongside other people that we meet, or other people that we interact with. And I think those are the two things that were helpful for us.
Naro, thank you so much. Such great points there. Just that reminder that, you know, if we are deserving of care as feminist activists, then of course the communities we work with are equally deserving of care, as are our partners, as are the stakeholders we work with. So just such an important reminder to infuse care holistically into everything that we're doing. I think otherwise we risk developing this elite group of staff working for this feminist organization. You have access to care, but what about everyone else in the ecosystem, right? What about them? So thank you for that reminder. So valuable. Ina, I wanted to come back to you, if it's okay, to talk about intersectionality. And you made such a powerful point earlier. You said something like, everyone moves through the organization differently. Everyone experiences the organization in different ways. And so I wondered do you want to say anything about kind of intersectional approaches to care, what they might look like, and how you think about care in an intersectional way?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And also, again, thinking about it in a collective way, and what the colleagues have been sharing as well. I think precisely this understanding of that we want to be consistent and to have policies that equally apply at the same time while holding individual needs. And that's also what we've been hearing around. So understanding that specific folks have specific needs. I mean, they're all specific in a way, right? And that there is a space in the organization to discuss this. And I mean, as you said, also, it's not just about the people who work in the organization, but it's also, you know, we want to be true to our values in our internal, external operations. So, for example, whenever we organize a convening, you know, or a movement space or an advocacy space, which is organizing convenings is something that we do. And then there are questions around what does it mean to do feminist logistics? What does it mean to approach spaces in ways that you can feel this is your space, that this space is for you, that it takes you into account and your comfort, your health, your well-being. So one very specific practice is around assessing different access needs whenever we have a convening, whether it's in person or virtual, acknowledging also that needs can change or evolve, and also that some are invisibilized. So just making sure that people have a chance to say, well, this is what would make me feel comfortable in that space. Which is, by the way, you know, something that also doesn't come naturally to many of us, because many of us live in a world where we're not asked those questions very often. Yeah, and it can be, you know, issues around accessibility, around language justice, around the way how the space looks and feels around. And I mean, of course, if you're talking about something that is involves international travel, then also understanding the violence of border regimes, and, you know, making sure there's a accompaniment for that it's not just you and the racist border regime, but there's a system of care and support also to deal together with the kind of violence of our world that we unfortunately encounter. Yeah, and I think maybe just one, again, very specific example, just going back to the policies, right? So something that we kind of tried out and experimented with and that we're keeping because it works really well is the possibility for people to move from 5 working days to 4 working days, so a condensed working week, where you still work full time, but it's condensed in 4 days. So you have a longer, which again, it's the flexibility. It's what works for you, and it can also change based on your personal situation, care responsibilities, personal preferences. So yeah, looking all the time at how we can increase flexibility of different working arrangements when it comes to staff, and of course when it goes to engaging movements and activists and members and partners, it's a different set of considerations, but then also looking what care means there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Ina. Really practical ideas and suggestions. I appreciate that. We've got about 10 minutes left before we want to try and create some time for questions and answers if we can. And I know one thing, because we did a survey with our audience a few months ago when we were conceiving the idea for this webinar, and people were telling us, they really wanted you to speak about challenges you faced in embedding collective care. And our audience, the common challenges people spoke about were things like, look, donor conditions. Another big challenge was, what do I do if I'm a junior staff member in an organization where the culture is toxic and I feel like I've got no power to change anything? These are some of the challenges our audiences are facing. But Tina, what about you? What about challenges to doing this work? Like what challenges have you faced, and do you have any advice or insights to share about how you tackled them?
Yeah, thanks. Just like everything else, everything has various challenges. I think the first one is the whole bit around limited funding, but unlimited time. Because as you can see, all of us here are working on strict deadlines. There are things that we must deliver, and that oftentimes leaves us with not much time to really pay attention to self, or collective and organizational care. So that's one challenge. And then secondly, there's no one size doesn't fit all. You might be quite intentional about doing lots of collective care with folks, but a whole bunch of them are not interested because they are still not thinking like you. Collective self and organizational care, I would call it like a whole bit of resistance. We are breaking, barriers around us, and that some people are not yet there, while others are there. So you might find resistance, or it's not consistent. And then the other challenge is if you work with colleagues who are in different time zones, now planning work together, and when you get together can be super challenging, because imagine if you're based in Uganda, you have a colleague in Australia, you have another in the US, you have another one in Europe. How can you do things together? That becomes super challenging. And how can you work around the whole challenge of, respecting barriers? Because if a colleague works in Australia and you get them on a call at this time, I mean, it might be midnight of their time. I don't even know what the difference is. And then the ones in the US, it's like early morning, their time. So all those are huge challenges that we need to work around. And then, of course, we would love a lot to work with each other in person. There's super fatigue of Zoom, Teams, and all that kind of thing, because you're just like in this box on a screen. In some ways, the actual experiencing of being human, is missed out, because then it's like on the virtual space. We are not virtual people, we are real people. We need connectivity. We need to experience each other as humans in totality, not through the virtual space. And then the other challenge is, if you might all be moving at different paces within a given organization, whereby some colleagues would like things to shift, but based on the setup of your organization, maybe certain policies are too difficult to move to accommodate some of the flexibility that we are talking about. you'll find that some organizations have very limited leave time for their staff. Others do not have the luxury to have the flex time of when, giving people options of whether you can work from home or you can have the 4 working days like Ina is saying, or you can all go for leave at the same time. So all those are real life time challenges. And again, sometimes people may fear to open up on the type of support that they need, because remember, we still hold biases, all of us, here and outside. Folks take a little bit longer time to fully get comfortable and know who to reach out to. Remember, we say, as Ina rightly put it, we experience the spaces differently. What may not be an issue for you might be a serious challenge for another person. So how able are they to speak? And that means we have to always remember to be listening, really listening, and listening deeply, and also valuing the experiences of others. When we say valuing, it doesn't mean we are celebrating how the negative emotions. We have to attach value to people's experiences and work out modalities of how to address those. And I like the idea, I think it was Naro, who said that we need to get everyone on board to speak about the options that work for them, and we accommodate those. In addition to the general ones that we must collectively pay attention to, for example, leave, flex time, checking in with each other, time off when people need that time, issues to do with the issues like menopause, parental leave. In my organization where I am, we do have sufficient parental leave for folks who are parents. That's that, and then job security is really taken care of. And then the whole bit, we do have some time off leave. Our leave is categorized in different ways, including leave for menopause for colleagues who might be challenged with that kind of menopause. And then making the work environment comfortable for colleagues. As I'm winding up, also the kind of partnerships we get into. Do we have like a partnership framework, equitable partnership framework that guides the partnership initiation of partnerships and working through the ways of working? Because those could either be toxic and create a setback to collective care and organizational care, or they could be enabling, and they could be like also sources of promoting collective care. So I think I don't want to run out of time for opening the discussion, but I think those are like big flags across the board. Yeah.
Thank you, Tina. Yeah, I hear you. This partnership agreement, an invitation for all of us. I wonder what does a caring partnership framework look like? What might that look like? Yeah, I'm really interested in that. And also listening to you speak, I'm thinking, my God, Tina, how many leadership lessons you're giving us there? Just general leadership lessons around listening, valuing, patience, putting on your intersectional lens. There's so much to learn from you about leadership in general. I've only got a couple of minutes before I'm going to invite people. Please do. We've got time for a couple of questions. Please do put some questions in the chat box. Keep them coming. Naro, over to you. Is there any challenge, just briefly, Naro, that you think it's worth sharing with our audience? What was it and how did you tackle it?
I think one tension is revealed and quite similar to what is being shared by Vera on the chat box. So they mentioned that from the rural areas, feminists still don't know how self-care looks like. And this is a common challenge in the Philippines because and it centralizes on the idea of care as a word or care as a language. And this is a source of tension for us. There was one environmental defender that I got to talk to, and they told me that, care and safe spaces are like sinigang. Sinigang is the Filipino stew, and it is made differently per family, And different people likes their sinigang to taste differently. Some likes it more sour, some likes it a bit more thick. And so when you talk about care, sometimes one of the biggest challenges is whether is this language consensual? Are we speaking the same language? In Filipino, we don't have a translation to care. And yet we have a lot of activists who use the word care. And so what does that mean? It means that care will unintentionally be something that is imposed. And sometimes the challenge there is whether this care coming from a neoliberal kind of care? Is this a productivity oriented care language? Am I telling you to take a break because I want you to come back so that you can work harder? Or is this my language of care, something that is actually being perceived or seen by the person as care? And so we problematize this word, care, even safe space, like all of the words that we have, we had to problematize because when you're going to rural areas, when you're talking to people from different cultures, and most especially when you have a team coming from different socioeconomic classes, you will be talking about care very differently. In the collective that I'm part of, for example, there are people who does not see care in the same way I see care. Like people telling you to, hey, take a break. I personally would sometimes not see it as care because I don't feel it care that way. So for that person, that's their care language. But for me, that's not my care language. And so I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the care that they were actually trying to give me. And so in our collective, we had to do that kind of unpacking. What does care look like for me when I'm giving care? And when does care look like for me when I'm receiving it? And then that's when we started to realize a lot of things about care. And one of which is it is very different. And oftentimes we use care coming from hegemonic frameworks, from, for example, from a model or from a book that we've read that, oh, according to this person, care is like this. This is from a beautiful quote by an amazing activist. But that is not the care language that is already being practiced, being embodied by the people in the organization. Because even that language needs to be surfaced and it needs to be recognized as such. And it's the same when it comes to mental health, because all of these are words that are not coming from the grassroots, from the indigenous psychological perspective. This is coming from somewhere else. And they are like glasses. They're like glasses that we fill with the practices that we have. And so one of those things that was a tension for us and which we're trying to practice right now is really just to unearth the language of care that we already have and the language of care that people need. And this is something as simple as, for example, asking people how would they feel cared for? Something as challenging, as disruptive as that question can reveal many things in an organization. And it can actually tell you that the kinds of care that we have been practicing weren't actually caring for that person.
Yeah.
It can actually be imposing. It can actually be uncomfortable because there are people, for example, coming from contexts that do not show care or does not show love or affection very freely. And so to receive care is very, very strange. And so sometimes we need to ask them what kind of care would you like to receive?
Yeah.
That makes you feel cared for. So I think that's on my end.
Amazing. Thank you, Naro. Some really great reflective questions here that we'll, with Naro's permission, we'll share them with you in the follow-up session resource. But I'm thinking a lot about that question you asked, what is your care language? And I'm thinking, gosh, I need to give that some thought. What is my care language? I'm not sure I know. There's times when you feel disconnected from your care language. So thanks for that reminder. Natalie, can I ask you to choose one question? We've got about 5 minutes just to say to our speakers, if we can do 2 questions, great. But is there one question that's coming up in the chat box that we could invite our panelists to respond to? And thanks to those of you who are chatting in the chat box, answering questions.
Yeah, I just want to flag this one from Becky first, who's making a link between care and accountability. So she asks what intersectional care practices may exist for feminists, maybe more than feminists, to promote accountability to self and others. So Ina, perhaps can I come to you first on that one?
So I was just looking at the last points on the chat, and I will need you to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry, Ina. Yeah. So the question is, are there any intersectional care practices which enhance organizational cultures and personal well-being and purposefully promote accountability to self and others? So I guess the question is, what's the link between care and accountability and other practices that promote accountability and care?
You know, it's a conversation we had once a while ago, and I think what really stayed with me from that conversation was also to think about accountability as a form of care. Because so it's not an attention, you know, am I holding you accountable or am I just being nice and caring for you? But actually also seeing that holding each other accountable is a form of care, and it means holding each other accountable on our professional commitments, on, you know, specific like commitments to timelines or whatever, but also holding each other accountable on being realistic in our work planning, making sure that if you are unwell, you know, I'm all for like a gentle peer pressure. So if somebody shows up to a meeting and they're unwell, but they insist they can go, it's like, are you sure? We would all really love you to just go and rest and, you know, fulfill touch. So I think it's different forms of care and different forms of accountability that for me are actually just part of you know, of reinventing professionalism that is true to our values, and that is the way that we want to live and work together. And if I can also just add an institutional aspect to it, which I think came from you know, from the question about the tensions and the challenges, is and that I think is connected to some of the questions in the chat boxes around donor pressure, which we know is real. And so I just wanted to mention that there are amazing feminist funders out there that do fund holistic security and safety, collective care, and that also research and publish on that, trying to influence other funders. 25 years ago already, the Urgent Action Fund in Latin America and the Caribbean published What is the Point of Revolution If We Cannot Dance?, which was, you know, revolutionary in itself and was based on interviews with so many activists. And I remember reading it and thinking, oh my God, you know, there are women and gender diverse activists out there that have never, you know, took a vacation for 25 years, you know, because of the things that come in the chat box, like guilt and so on. And I think it's important. I mean, as feminists, we challenge power structures all the time. And donors are not an easy power structure to challenge, but there are allies. And I think sometimes it is possible. There was this comment from Vera in the chat box about, you know, how exhausting it is to work on LGBTQ rights in a homophobic context, for example. And I think it is something to challenge the funders on, like, it's human beings who are doing this work. And, you know, we are not just there. We need to sustain ourselves. So just encouraging that it's not easy to challenge funders, but it's possible sometimes, and there can be allies and even good documentation we can use for that.
Thank you, Ina. And Jane's asking a sort of related question, I think, where she's asking, how can we balance care for others, recognizing their individual capacity and needs, whilst also holding organizational work tasks and responsibilities as important? Tina, I wonder if you to add anything to that, just briefly in a minute, perhaps.
Yeah, so very quickly, I think we just need to embed self and collective care in everything that we are doing, whether it's a project that should be part of our approach so that it's already inbuilt, as well as within our own organizational ways of working, that just needs to become the routine, the normal way of doing things. There are those smaller ones that we talked about that are easy to do even without money. And then there are those that perhaps need more reform within the institutions, because we as feminists, we are doing things differently. It's not business as usual. So it's like a work in progress. We keep doing and keep going. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina. We're going to move on, and I'm going to hand back to Layla.
Yes, you are. Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm sorry there's not more time for Q&A. The reason there isn't is because in our last session, we got feedback from you that you wanted more time in breakout groups. So that's what we're trying to protect for you. We're trying to be accountable and respond to your feedback. So look, while Natalie sets up the breakout groups, what we want to do is invite you to participate in creating a shared collective care resource. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link to this shared collective care resource in the chat box. And I'm going to play some music and give you a couple of minutes, but that resource is basically inviting you to share any collective care practice that you've been part of or you witnessed. Type a short note, share what it was, so that by the end of the session, we've got a beautiful mosaic of collective care practices that we can take away with us. Natalie, have I forgotten anything? Yeah, I think that's it. So I'm going to play some music. Natalie's going to do the breakout groups. Please do let us know if you can't access that document. Otherwise, feel free to type in your ideas on that document, and my music's going to start now.
Darling, you send me. Darling, you send me. Honest you do, honest you do, honest you do. Oh, you thrill me. Darling, you thrill me. Baby, you thrill me. Honest you do, honest you do, honest you do. At first, thought it was infatuation. Knew his life, so long. Now I find myself wanting. I want you to marry me. Please take me home. Yeah. You send me. Darling, you send me. Darling, you send me. Honest you do, honest you did. You know you did, you know you do now. You send me. Everything it takes to win me. And when you do the things you do, you know that you send me. Honest you send me. You send me, baby, you send me. You move it, you groove it, ooh, you send me. I just need you to send me. It's a silly melody of love. I just can't stand it. Thrill, kill, ooh, send me, baby.
Thanks, everyone. We're going to invite you to keep adding to that shared resource. Let's make it as beautiful as it can be. While Natalie finalizes the breakout groups, I'm just going to invite you I'm going to share a couple of questions with you in the chat box that you could consider discussing. You could choose whichever question most resonates with you, or you could choose to discuss something completely different. It's completely up to you. Our questions are, please share. What is one way you've tried to embed a culture of care, or one way you've experienced one in your organizations? And our second question that you might want to discuss is what most resonated with you from what the panelists shared, and why was that? So Natalie, just let us know. I know Natalie's furiously working away, trying to open these groups.
We're good to go.
We're good to go. Thank you.
If you've asked for an individual reflection room, you'll be in one. So there'll be other people there, but please feel free to mute yourself, go off camera, use that space for your own reflection. And we've got about 10 minutes, Layla.
Yeah, just over 10 minutes. See you later.
In 10 minutes. If anyone is here has had a problem getting into their room, please let me know. Sophia, would you be able to pause the recording?
Yes.
Natalie's on it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed those conversations and connections with your peers. While you were doing that, I was just reading some of the entries that you shared on our collective care resource there. Thank you. So please do continue to add to that if you've got anything that you'd like to share. We've got loads of really inspiring examples of organisations implementing care budgets. Someone was talking about a feminist meetings manifesto where they dedicate 10 minutes at the end of every meeting for some kind of collective care practice or time. People are talking about sharing music and food, both in person and virtually, the organisation resources. So loads there that we hope you can draw some inspiration from. And now we just want to create a little bit of space as we draw towards the close of the session, just to reflect on how this conversation is making you feel and what it might mean for us in our feminist practice. So my first question to you is just an invitation to share in 2 or 3 words, how did that discussion in your breakout groups make you feel? Layla shared that question in the chat box. Please just share 1 or 2 words in the chat. I'm going to ask us to create a bit of a kind of beautiful waterfall. So unless you've already done it already, just don't press send yet. Pause your sending. This might not work. Pause your sending if you can. Type 1 or 2 words. And I'm going to give everyone a moment just to do that. Just take a moment to reflect. And then I'm going to count us down. Some of you are doing it already, but after 3, just share what you're thinking. 1, 2, 3, and press send. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. A waterfall of reflections there. People are feeling thoughtful, inspired, reflective, reassured, heard. I'm really pleased. Motivated, powerful. Thank you. And seen. I'm so pleased. Some really powerful reflections from you there. Thank you. And so we just want to give you an opportunity before we depart ways, just to think, okay, so what does this mean? What have I learned today, and what might it mean for how care appears in my life and my work? And so we're just going to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on 2 more questions. And those questions, again, they're in the chat box, and we're not going to ask you to share your reflections on this. But the first is, what small step could you take towards building a collective care practice in your context, or perhaps build on the practice that you've already got? And 2, what's one way in which you can gently hold yourself accountable for taking this forward? So again, we're just going to take a pause and take a couple of minutes. We'll play a little bit of music in the background. Perhaps you want to make some notes for yourself, doodle perhaps. And if you follow that link, you'll see a handout to that resource, so you can take it away as well. So just a couple of minutes, pause and reflection on those questions.
Never meant to be you, never meant to be me, never meant to be us. Never meant for all of this, never meant for you to love, never meant for you to trust. So I'll take my time next time, and I'll do it right. And I'll take my time next time. Only with grace I'll make you a flood in my mind. Only with grace I'll take all the words that you said when you brought it back from the ground. It really waters me down. Never meant to be you, never meant to be me, never meant to be us. Never meant for all of this, never meant for you to love.
Okay, Layla, can I just ask you to pause the music? Thank you. I'm feeling energized by that music. Thank you very much. So I just want to give an opportunity for our wonderful panelists just to share 1 or 2 words, if that's okay, panelists, on how you're leaving the session today. 1 or 2 words on how you're leaving the session today, if that's okay. Naro, can I come to you?
I feel that I'm leaving this space with a lot more care muscle, like a lot more stronger when it comes to care.
Thank you, Naro. And Ina?
My word was gratitude to everybody for sharing, to creating and holding that space, and for these conversations that hopefully help us challenge ourselves and each other with, being more accountable for our care and our values. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tina?
For me, it's a lot of gratitude and, of course, motivated to continue doing this, because it's like it cuts across for everyone, and there's so many other people who are doing wonderful things that we can learn from and keep going. Thanks.
Thank you. And a huge thanks on behalf of all of us in the session today and our 3 organising partners for the 3 of you and your participation today. Particularly, you've brought such a careful approach to really embodying care in this space, and we really appreciate you, and thank you for sharing your experience and insights and examples with us, because I know that will have inspired many people on the call today. So before we go, we would really appreciate it, everybody, if you wouldn't mind sharing a couple of words with us in this feedback survey, just to hold us accountable, let us know how we've done and how we might improve in future sessions. And then to close us out, I'm going to just hand over to my wonderful colleague Sharon, who's going to share a poem with us as we leave the space. Thanks once again, everyone, for coming today.
Thank you, Natalie. Hello, everyone. I'll be reading this poem, Meditations in an Emergency by Cameron Awkward Ridge. I wake up and it breaks my heart. I draw the blind and the thrill of rain breaks my heart. I go outside. I ride the train, walk among the buildings, men in Monday suits, the flight of doves, the city of tents beneath the underpass, the huddled mass, old women hawking roses, and children, all of them break my heart. There's a dream I have in which I love the world. I run from end to end like fingers through her hair. There are no borders, only wind. Like you, I was born. Like you, I was raised in the institution of dreaming. Hand on my heart, hand on my stupid heart. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you another time. Take care. Thank you. Bye. Okay. Sophia, maybe we can go ahead and stop the recording.